Okay, I'm doing page 145, section 3.4, number 6D. So the first thing we want to do with this is see if we can factor it at all. So on the numerator, there's not much we can do, so it's just x squared over, so we can take out an x, and then we're left with x squared minus 9, and that factors to x plus 3 and x minus 3. Okay. From here we can see that there aren't any 3's on top, so we won't be able to cross any of this out, but both the numerator and the denominator have x's, so we can cross those out. So cross one of the x's out. Oops. Okay, cross both the x's out. So then we're left with x over x plus 3, x minus 3. Okay, now we can start listing everything we know. So starting with the domain we get from the denominator before we cross anything out, and we want to set the things to 0 because we know we can't divide by 0. So x cannot equal, from the x, that's just going to translate to 0. X plus 3, that's going to be negative 3, and x minus 3, that's going to be plus 3. So x cannot equal 0 or plus or negative 3. Okay, vertical asymptote, we get that once we have crossed out any holes. So for the vertical asymptote, it's x equals 3 and negative 3. Okay, now we can do our horizontal asymptote. So horizontal asymptote is y equals, okay, so now looking at this, we see what has the highest exponent. So it's x cubed is greater than x squared, has a higher exponent. So we know that the horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 0. So again, that's looking at the degree, and the 3 is a higher degree than 2. Okay, and now we can do our x-intercept. So for x-intercept, you set y to 0, but you only really have to worry about the numerator because when you multiply 0 by the denominator, it's still going to be 0. So 0 equals x squared, so x equals 0. So that point is 0, 0. Y-intercept, we have to set all of the x's to 0. So once we do that, this is going to be 0 over 0 divided by 0 minus 0. That's also going to be the point of 0, 0. Okay, so now that we have gotten that, we'll find our hole. So to find our hole, we look at what we crossed out and what the value of x was. So the value of x here was 0, so we know that. And then now we plug in 0 for x in the most simplified form over here. So if we do this, 0 divided by 0 plus 3, which is 3, times 0 minus 3, which is negative 3, so that's just going to equal 0. So our hole, our x-intercept, and our y-intercept happen to all be the same. So now we can start finding out specific points, and since we know our domain is plus or minus 3, we can do a few values that are between that. So we can start with 1. So when x is 1, you plug in 1 for x, and the value is negative 1/8. And that was just done on the calculator. When x is 2, the value is negative 2/5. When the value, so now let's move to the other side. So when the value is -1, f of x is 1/8. So there's a trend in this. You see that when you switch the negative signs, the f of x also switches. So now that we know that, we're going to know that -2 is 2/5. And so doing a few points on the other side of the vertical asymptote, so -4 is going to be -4/7, so +4 is 4/7, and just extending this a bit more, -5 is -5/16, I believe, and then +5 is 5/16. Okay, so now we can start graphing our points. So first thing we want to do is draw our vertical and horizontal asymptotes. So our first is x plus 3. So 1, 2, 3. So we want to just draw a dotted line up here. And this is x equals 3 and -3. I'll just write down here because there's more room. X equals -3, and our horizontal asymptote is y equals 0, so just across the x-axis. Y equals 0. Okay. We also have a horizontal asymptote of x equals 0, but we'll see that the hole will actually occur on this line, which is totally fine. Okay, so starting to graph, our first point, when x is 1, f of x is -1/8, so we can just do a point there. And then when x is 2, f of x is -2/5, so over there. And then we know when x is 0, y is also 0, and that's our hole. So we'll draw a circle here. Then when x is -1, y is 1/8. When x is -2, y is 2/5. Okay, so now from this shape, we can just concur that the shape is squiggle. Oops. So it never touches that. And make that drawing a bit better. Okay. Let's try again.
Yes, Sam.
Okay. So now we can graph on the other side of the asymptotes. So when x is 4, y is 4/7, so that's just a bit above a half. When x is 5, y is 5/16, so we can put it there, and then we can just concur that the shape is going to look like that, and it's never going to touch the asymptotes. And then we do the same for here. So when x is -4, so over here, y is -4/7, and then when x is -5, y is -5/16. Okay, and then we'll just draw our shape. Okay. So it's a bit messy, but that's the idea. So then you're done.